In this video, we will discuss programming basics such as data types, variables, identifiers, and keywords. What are they, and what do they do in our code? We will tackle it here in our video. Let's start with keywords. Java keywords are also known as reserved words. Keywords are particular words that act as a key to a code. For example, look at this image. This is an example of a simple code in Java. With a few lines of code, several keywords are used to make the program work. Given example of keywords are package, public, class, static, and void. What do they actually mean? Let's start with the package keyword. A package is like a folder. Groups are related Java classes, interfaces, and sub-packages together. For example, you want your images to be organized and placed in one folder. So in your file explorer, you created a folder for your pictures. In a programming context, you can imagine that the folder is a package and your images are your Java files. Packages are used for organizing your code. Next, public keyword is an access modifier that represents visibility. It tells who can use a class, method, or variable. If something is marked public, it means any code from anywhere can access it. Class keyword. It is used to declare a class in Java. Class is a blueprint in Java for creating objects. It defines what data an object can have and what actions it can perform. For example, construction workers are building a house. But before they even make the house, they need a plan, which an architect will do. An architect will make a blueprint with the design and calculations for how much cement, steel, and paint they needed to make the house. In programming context, classes are blueprints which then describe the object with data and actions. Static keyword. Static keyword, a modifier meaning belongs to the class, not an instance. Think of static as something that belongs to the class itself, not to the individual objects made from it. So for example, imagine a school. Each student has their own things, such as notebook, pens, grades. These are normal variables and methods, but some things are shared by the whole class. For example, the classroom section, the teacher's name, or the bell schedule. These are the same for everyone, no matter which student you ask. That's what static means. It is shared by all. A void keyword, it is a return type of a method. It tells the program that the method does not return any value after it runs. Now let's talk about the other parts of the code. Looking at our main method, the main is not a keyword. It's a conventional method name that the JVM looks for as the program entry point. But the main itself is just an identifier. Important note that the main identifier is crucial to the code. Once you change the name, it will give you an error message in your code. Inside of your main parameters, there's a string parameter args. It is used for command line arguments. With all of these statements, you're able to create a main method that can then run our code. Another important note that every keyword, identifier, and parameters in our main method should be complete. If not, it will also give you an error. As for the last statement inside of our main method, we are telling our program that we should write a text inside our console, which means that he will write "Hello YouTube." To understand it even further, let's try to code this in Eclipse to see if it actually works. So now we're right here in Eclipse application. So you can use pretty much any IDE you want. You can use NetBeans, you can use Eclipse. Now if you want a harder way or doing the prompt command line, you can use the Notepad, Notepad++, and Visual Studio Code to code your Java program. But since we want it to make it easier for us to code our Java program, I'm going to use Eclipse for now, and I'm going to show you also how to make Java project, a package, and a Java class, which then we can write our code there and do our example screenshot earlier in our presentation. So in order to make a Java project, first let's go to the file option. So here, drag your cursor into new and then go to Java project. So in Java project, just name your Java project. So in naming your Java project, be more descriptive and name exactly your project on what you actually want to do. So since we just want to print something in the console, and this is for a tutorial video. I'm going to say YouTube tutorial. There, I'm gonna name it YouTube tutorial for project name. Let's hit finish or enter. Now you have this in your package explorer. Look at your package explorer. You have now your new Java project. Now with your new Java project, hit right click and click new again, and this time create a package. So with package, just like we said earlier, a package is a folder for our code to be organized with your code. So usually you name it only one letter, I mean with one word, and you can pretty much name anything you want. You can also do a tool words just like this one. Okay, so I'm naming it with a camel case, since our first letter starts with small letter, and with the second word it comes with a capital letter. But for now, we're naming it with one word only. I'm gonna name it source, and I'm gonna hit finish. So now your YouTube tutorial have a JRE system library, and you have the source folder, which then have the source package, and inside of your source package we hit right click again, and we hit new, and we hit class. Now with class, you can pretty much name a class you want, but again, we talked about earlier that we should name our class with starting with a capital letter, such as main. You can name your class in main with a big letter. If I started with a small letter, as you can see, it says here that type name is discouraged. By convention, Java type names usually start with a uppercase letter. So even with Eclipse, it tells you that it is better to name your Java class starting with a capital letter. But I want it to be more descriptive with my class, so I'm gonna name it Hello YT, which means YouTube. So I'm just going to copy what the screenshot is written there. And I'm also gonna tell you that you should check the public static void main string args. Basically what it does is it automatically writes the main method inside of this class. So when I hit finish, by the way, check this. Okay, check this, and when we hit finish, as you can see, it created the whole needed statements to write the class, and also declare the class and make a main method. So now that we have created our class and our main method, now we want to write some text in our console, and in order to do that, we need to write System.out.println. Inside of our System.out.println, inside of the parentheses, we write, this is very important that you put your text inside of a double quote, which means it's a string. But later on, we're gonna talk about strings and other data types. For now, we're gonna write hello YouTube. So basically, this code means that it will write in the console hello YouTube. And once we run this, by the way, by running it, we need to hit this green button, and once we hit the green button, it will show in our console that says hello YouTube. So let's check it out if it's going to work. So just hit OK, and as you can see inside of our console, it says hello YouTube. So You can pretty much write a lot of text here. So if we just also say it again, System.out.println, and write another text. Let's say I want to display my name. So So as you can see, I wrote in the second line of my System.out.println my name, so I'm introducing myself. So supposedly it should run hello YouTube, and it goes another print line or another line, and it will say I'm Mark Gerald Pound. Let's try and hit it. Let's play. And as you can see, it says hello YouTube, I'm Mark Gerald Pound. So so we created already an introduction in our program. Now for just a test for you guys, I want you to create a simple introduction about yourself. Give a little description about yourself by writing a print line statement here in our code. So just a little bit of practice. So now I also want to talk about that everything that written inside of this code are very important and also case sensitive, which then we're gonna talk about later on, the basic syntax. But just to prove that everything is important, especially in keywords, identifiers being case sensitive is very important in Java, since if you only written let's say for example, you see this public in our class, this public declaration, if I put this in started with capital letter, as you can see, it already says that I have an error. That means Java is very case sensitive when it comes to syntax. Let's say for example, I've talked about earlier that the main method should be complete and concise on the syntax. So for example, if I remove the public in our main method and hit play, as you can see, it gives me an error saying that the main method not found in class source hello YouTube. Please define the main method as public static void main string args. So basically it's saying that we should only write our main method as public static void main string args. Basically it should be complete. Even if you only change only one single character, like let's say in static, I remove the S and change it with a bigger letter S. As you can see, it made it an error. So that means it will give me an error in my console saying that I should only write my main method as public static void main precisely. Another thing is that the main is also very important. Despite that it is only an identifier, you need to make it precisely with small letters and main. Like for example, if I make this a big letter M instead of small letter M and I try to run it, as you can see, it also gives me an error saying that I should only write the main method as it is. I should not change anything. So let's say I remove this and I change it to hello. I mean, technically this is a right method, but for a main method this is completely inaccurate and completely incorrect, since our identifier should be main only. So once we hit run, it should work. Since we've talked about basic syntax, let's go back to our presentation and talk about basic syntax of Java programming. So now that we have tested our code in Eclipse, now I want to talk about basic syntax. So what is basic syntax? Java is case sensitive, meaning that hello and hello would have different meaning in Java. This applies in every word in your code, including keywords, variables, classes, and methods. There are some rules that you need to follow to have a good format in your code. For example, for all class names, the first letter should be in uppercase. Each inner word's first letter should be in uppercase. For example, what we did earlier, hello YouTube. For method names, all method names should start with a lowercase. If several words are used to form the name of the method, then each inner word first letter should be in uppercase. That means a method name follows a format called camel case. This is where the first word starts with small letter and your second and other words starts with capital letters. For example, just like we did earlier with our main method, public static void main, Main starts with small letter. Data types. There are two types of data types, primitive data types and non-primitive data types. Primitive data types. The primitive data types include boolean, char, byte, short, int, long, float, double. While non-primitive data types, the non-primitive data types include classes, interfaces, and arrays. String is another type of data type, but it is not included in primitive data type since it is a class. Data types specify the different sizes and values that can store in a variable. Variables. A variable is a container that holds a value while the Java program is executed. A variable is assigned with a data type. Now that you've learned data types and variables, we will go into test it and see how it works in a real code. So now we're back in our Eclipse with our Java program, and this time I'm going to remove the two print line statements and we're going to focus on data types. So we've tackled earlier that there are 8 types of primitive data types. So there is a boolean, there are char, a byte, a short, long, int first, long, float, double. Is this 8? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so there are 8 types of primitive data types. So first, let's talk about boolean. So boolean is, let's write a comment. Boolean can hold a value either true or false. So boolean can hold only either two values. It's either a true or a false. So let's make it complete. So when I create a boolean variable, I'm going to create a identifier. So I'm going to make boolean is true and I'm going to give it a value true. So my variable is true has a value true, which is my variable is true is a type of boolean. So that means my variable holds a value either true or false. And in this case, it's true. So this is one of the variables that we have in our program. Also, I do want to mention that sometimes you can edit out your name or your identifier as camel case, or it can be underscore, such as this. This is my kind of format, is true. So this is also a valid identifier. But sometimes some other programmers, they like to concatenate two words by just making the second word with a first capital letter. But in my case, we can just say is underscore true. Also, the reason why I'm putting a underscore instead of just white space is because, as you can see, Java acts white space differently when it comes to identifiers. When you're creating an identifier, it shouldn't have a white space. It's supposed to be all characters, such as underscore, dollar sign, a number can be a number, and it can be a camel case format, but it cannot have a white space. You should avoid putting white space in your identifier. So that's the first data type that we have. Next, we have char, or a short term of characters. So basically, char, let's create a variable name or identifier. Let's say char and letter underscore a equals a single quote, semicolon, and a. So char holds a value which is a single character. So a is an example of single character. It can be capital A, can be a small letter a. It could be any characters that you want, such as this pound, this percentage, this percent sign, 1, which is numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. It can also be special characters, just like we said, such as this can be asterisk, it can be an underscore, okay, but it cannot hold more than one character. So let's say for example I say hello. So as you can see, the program is telling us an error in the value of our char variable. It's saying that invalid character constant. So basically, a more than one character is invalid when it comes to char data type. So a char can only hold one character. Also, I do want to mention that white space is considered as a character. So as you can see, I put a white space here and it's not giving me an error. It's because a white space also acts as a character in our program. But if I put two spaces, as you can see, it's giving me another error. It's because two spaces equals to two characters. Of course, one space is one character only. So char, again, is a data type that holds a single character. Okay? Next, byte. So byte is a data type that holds a whole number, money. Let's say money. My byte data type has a identifier money, which is equals to 10. Wait, hold on. Let me just comment this out. Okay. So as you can see, my variable money has an equal of 10. So a byte can hold a whole numbers, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. But a byte has a limitation of which value it can hold. It has estimatedly negative 127 to 128 integer value. I think if I put 128 here, it should give me an error. Yeah, is because 128 is his maximum capacity, or rather this is his limitation. So when I say 127, it can still hold that value, but when I say 140, it cannot hold that value anymore because it can only store positive 1 to 127. But when it comes to negative, also, as I said, a byte can store a whole number, but also a negative number. So let's say negative 2, it can hold a negative 2 number. Can also hold a negative 20 number, okay? But it cannot hold, I think, 129, yes, or 128. No, that is its maximum capacity. It's only 128. So when it reaches negative 130, it will give you an error because that is, well, it's already maximum on what the byte data type can hold. So it only goes one, let's comment it out. It can only hold negative 128 to 127. So that means byte can hold a whole number between negative 128 to 127. More likely, the reason why you would use byte instead of short int long is that you want a precise value that can a byte or that variable can hold. Or sometimes it's also about the memory. It's also about memory saving, where a byte, if you compare it with int and long, byte can only get only a little bit of memory instead of integer with a 32-bit of space, instead of also long, which have a 64-bit space. With byte, it only has an 8-bit space. So it's about memory saving, at the same time it's precision on the value it can hold. Also, I forgot to comment out something in the char. I'm gonna put here hold value char single char. Okay. Next, we have the short. So short is another data type that holds a whole number. Salary. Say salary is my identifier of my short variable, and I put this. So as you can see, if you compare byte and short has more space when it comes to value. So as you can see, it can hold up to 10,000 whole number, instead of byte that can only hold 127. So the difference between them is the sizes of which value they can hold. So let's comment out something here like short much bigger than byte. Next up, we have the int, or we call integer. So when it comes to integer, this is actually the most default and very used variable for most programmers when they store a number. Let's make a variable name. Let's say, we could also say hours. There we go. Ours is also a number. So I can hold a lot of bigger numbers here. As you can see, I can hold more numbers. Okay, there you go. That's this maximum. So it can hold 0, 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's probably like billion. Integer is a type of data type that's also like short in byte but with a bigger capacity. Int is much bigger than short. And lastly, we have the long data type. Long data type is, again, can hold a whole number but a much bigger value than int, short, and byte. So let's say seconds, right? Milliseconds. Let's say seconds. You want to hold a really big number. You can do it with long. But as you can see, there's something happening here where if I put this amount of number, it doesn't really have an error. But when I added more numbers, it gives me an error. But you can identify your value with a long data type by putting an L in the as part of your number. So you're telling the program that this value is stored in a data type long. So that means this variable is capable of getting a high amount of value inside of this variable. As you can see, I'm putting a lot of zeros here and it's already big and it's already maximum, probably around right here. So again, long is much bigger than, and now we're going with the float. A float works a bit differently. It can hold a decimal value. So to give you an example, like a grade, float as an identifier grade with equal to, let's say, 2.5 or let's say 1.5. So why is it giving me an error? It's because float is also like long. It needs a sign in the end, which is the f. Now, why are we putting f inside of our value with a variable float? It's because we're trying to tell in our program that this value is held by a data type float. Now, a float is used for a precise value of decimal numbers. So it can only hold a very limited numbers of, decimal values. So I'm going to try to put many. It doesn't stop. Never mind. It can actually hold a lot of value. Okay, I thought it can't. Another reason why you would use a float, a variable, to get a decimal value is because float has a smaller bit than double. Okay, but let's comment out first before we go ahead in a double. So holds a decimal, holds a number with decimal value. Next we have double. Double is the same as float. It works the same with them. But okay, let's make the variable first. I'm gonna call it average and let's say 1.2. So with double, it can hold much more value. It can hold much value than float. But on the contrary, double is much larger than float. So that means in memory, this is much bigger or much expensive than a float. But it's also the same. So double holds number with a decimal value. So that's the 8 data types or 8 primitive data types of Java programming. There is Boolean, char, byte, short, int, long, float, and double. Okay, so before we end this introduction to data types, I want to use first these data types, at least one of them. So in order to show our value or our variable values, we can print it out in our console by using the system or the print statement. So we write again System.out.println semicolon. Okay, but this time, since we're not writing a string, rather we are calling a variable to be printed out in the console. So in order to do that, we have to mention the identifiers. So let's say I want to print my boolean. So I want to print out my boolean variable which is holding a true. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call my Boolean variable by listing the identifier. So now what's happening is I am printing my variable, which is value is true. So when I print this out, it should say true in the console. So let's try and do that. As you can see, it printed out true. So what about, let's try with other variables. Let's say I want to print out my char, okay? So I'm gonna print my char. So I'm gonna call the identifier again, and it should print out a, or the value of our char variable. And there you go. So let's try with other stuff such as my money. So it should say 127, because our variable money is equal to 127. Now take note, I do want to say that System.out.println without double quote, and I'm calling the identifier money, is completely different with System.out.println with double quote, which inside is money. So what's happening here is that in the first line, I'm calling the money variable. So that means I'm saying that I should print the value of my money variable. But instead, in the second line, what I'm doing is I'm printing out the character money. So I'm literally saying that you should print the word money, because that's how string works. It means that in double quote, everything inside of a double quote is a string. So instead of printing 127, it's going to say money. So let's try that. As you can see, below in my 127 is money, because money in this case is string literals. So that's pretty much it with data types. So let's proceed in the next lesson. So let's deeply dive more in variables. A variable is the name of a memory location. There are three types of variable in Java: local, instance, and static. Local variables. Local variables are declared in methods or construct, or a variable declared inside of a method is called local variable. Instance variable. A variable declared inside of a class but not inside of a body of a method. Static variable. A variable declared as static but cannot be local. So for better understanding, let's try this in our code in Eclipse. Let's go ahead and try the three types of variables we've talked about. So we talked about local variable, an instance variable, and a static variable. With this, we're gonna try to use three of those variables. So first, we actually talked about local variable. We actually did it earlier with making a variable inside of a method. So for example, int with a identifier net underscore pay is equals to 4,000. So in order to use and access this variable, we can just say System.out.println, and I'm just going to write the identifier. So in this case, it will write down 4,000 because our net pay has an equal of 4,000. So now we know about local variables. So what about the two types of variables, such as instance variable and static variable? How do we use it and why is it needed? Well, let's talk about first the static variable. Basically, what you want to think about static is that when you say it is static, that means it is inside or part of that class. So let's say this static int salary is part of Hello YouTube class. So that means you can say that in Hello YouTube class, there is an int salary that is static, or it's part of that class. So when I try to write this here inside of the main method, so I'm just gonna say System.out.println, and I say salary, as you can see, it doesn't have any issue. It allows me to write this down. Wait. So basically what's happening is that I am printing out the int salary that the class has. So this variable is part of this class. That's why I can access this variable in this class. But if I try to print this in another different class, supposedly it should not be accessed since it is static. So now, what about the int age or the instance variable we have here? So when I try to output this, so by the way, I want to teach you this shortcut of System.out.println. So basically, you write down sys out or sysout and then hit control space and it will give you this autocorrection of statement and just hit enter. It will directly give you the whole statement. So now I want to output the age I have here, so let's try that. Oh, but as you can see, there is a problem. Now, the program is giving me an error. It says here that cannot make a static reference to the non-static field age. So basically, if we want to access this variable, we need to do a bit more additional steps. In order to make this, we talked about class, but we also talk about object in an architect type thing. The example that I said, like a house and a cement and stuff. So basically, we're gonna do that in order to access the int8. So how do we do that? So in order to make an object, we need to call out our class. Our class is hello YT. The hello YT is this class, and I need to call it with a new object. I'm gonna call it my age equals new hello YT. So in this case, we already created an object. So our blueprint, think of it this way. Our blueprint is hello YT. Our object is my age. So now I have the object my age, which has an attributes or data of int age. So my age object has now the information of in age. Now the only part that we have to do now is how do we access that attribute on my new object, my age. So now instead of just saying age, we're going to say my underscore age dot, and then now there is this age in hello YouTube. So that means inside of my age, which has the blueprint of hello YouTube or hello YT, which has an attribute age or the integer age, which is the variable age that has a value of 20. So I'm just gonna put it here, age, and now I can print out my age instant variable. So now supposedly I should have my 20 for this statement, salary or 2000 for this statement, and 4000 for this statement. So basically 20, 2000, and 4000 in my console. So let's try that. So as you can see, we have accessed all of our variables. So we have tackled pretty much everything about basic programming in Java, and I hope you've learned something in this lecture. So if you have any more further questions, leave it down in the comments and I'll try my best to answer it for you, and I see you guys in the next time.